going to really give you some information about what kind of person he is, what he places value and importance on, and really help to see if you have a compatibility with him. He could say something as off the wall as, I want to run with the bulls in Pamplona, or he could say that I want to spend 5 years dedicated to missionary work in a poor or third world country. And that you have to really think about it. What he's saying is that something that you'd be willing to do with him? Helps you to see, okay, we're on the same page, or I would love to do that, right? I've never thought about that, but that's a great idea, or I would never do that in a million years. You're crazy. Okay, you never know. And with all of these questions, you never know what a person will say or what asking deeper questions will reveal about a person. You don't want to ask the standard, regular resume questions. Where do you work? How many brothers and sisters do you have? Yeah, you want to know that information, but you want to ask deeper questions that don't just give you a one-word answer like yes or no, but questions he really has to sort of expound upon.
Yo, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening, downloading, and subscribing to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I'm 12 Kyle. All right, check this out. On this podcast, ladies, I'm going to put you up on game. Now, I will be the first to admit, now some men aren't as talkative as I am. However, men will be conversational if you ask the right questions. Now you may ask, what is the right questions? Well, I'll tell you what, sit back and listen because I've got 21 questions to ask a guy. So I'm going to drop the theme music and we'll get the podcast jumping. Let's get it. Welcome back. As I mentioned at the top, I'm going to be talking about 21 questions to ask a guy. Now, before I get started, ladies, while I'm going to be putting you up on game, I'm not going to break any man laws because that's just not something that I'm going to do. Just be clear. So I came to this idea. I was doing some reading and I came across one of my old blogs where I actually had this written out. And I was like, you know what, that would be good for the podcast. So I decided to crack open the mic and kind of talk about this. Now with the 21 questions, here's what I did. I have them broken down into 3 different categories. 7 questions are background questions. The next 7 are personality questions. And then the final 7 questions are intimacy questions. So you kind of get the gist of what it is. So without further ado, as far as the background questions, let me say this. Learning about somebody's, past can be very tricky because a lot of times you can ask questions that you really don't need to know the answers to. But, you don't ever want to seem like you're giving someone the third degree or you're grilling them about what it is, from their past. But at the same time, you want to know a little bit more about them. So I can understand a woman asking a guy something about their past and, just really being inquisitive and not necessarily being nosy or anything to that matter. And then, by encouraging a man to tell stories about himself, you not only learn more about him, but you learn about his history and, how he looks at life. So the first question is, and these are in no particular order. What's the earliest memory that you have? Again, open-ended question. I think is a great question. It makes you think. I think as you get a little older, that question probably gets harder and harder to answer because you tend to forget stuff. I think most people can remember back to at least the age of 2. At least I can. But a great open-ended question to ask a guy, ladies. What's the earliest memory that you've ever had? Question 2. Where's the best place that you ever went with your parents and what did you do there? Very good open-ended question. It gets a guy to talk about his family life, if you will, and maybe how he was raised. And I think this question tends to kind of branch off and it makes you kind of, dig a little deeper and it opens a guy up, if you will, to talk a little bit more about his history and, where he's from and how he grew up. And I think that's key, because if you're getting to know a guy, that's something that you definitely want to know. Question 3, tell me about your best friend. I have to laugh at this one because it's always interesting to hear a guy talk about his best friend or best friends, if you will, or guys in his crew. And it's more than just saying, JoJo is a real OG, that type of thing. Is when you say, tell me about your best friend, you really want to explore and find out what it is that makes, the friendship that he has with his best friend, what makes it such. And, it also gives the ladies a chance to, see where you value friendship, to be honest. And I think that type of things and the things that come along with friendship, dependability, loyalty, being trustworthy, all of those elements are, within that question. So ask a guy to tell you about his best friend. Most guys can talk, a good little while about their best friend or best friends, if you will, because some guys have more than one best friend. But yeah, that's a great open-ended question to ask a guy. Question 4, what kind of books / TV shows / movies / video games do you like and why? Now that's a loaded question, and that question should garner a lot of talk, if you will. And the reason being is because there isn't any man, I should say, who doesn't have, a particular book that they like, or TV shows that they like, or movies that they like, or video games that they like. The latter probably will get you a lot of conversation, to be honest. TV shows, movies, and video games. And that's not to say that men don't read books, because we do. But honestly, the TV shows and movies and video games, if they play video games or used to play video games, are usually the ones that kind of really carry the conversation. And the reason being is that I think we tend to get heavily involved in those things. Your favorite TV shows, you can talk about that ad nauseum. Your favorite movies, why you like them, what's special about them. And then, of course, video games. I mean, to be honest, that's a rite of passage for a lot of men, being able to play video games. So, again, great question to ask. Question 5, what's the worst job you've ever had? Man, listen. Everybody, most men have had a shitty job. I can't think of any of my male friends who, maybe there's one who probably, anyway, it's not about me. Nonetheless, most guys have had a terrible job, myself included. And man, I hated that job. But I will say this much, though. The one thing that question will spawn is you will see, what they did and what they had to endure at that particular job, why they stayed at that job and how long they stayed at that job, and what kind of character it built for them to, persevere at that job. So I think that's very critical. So again, ladies, if you're listening to these answers, there's a lot that a guy's going to answer the question, but you can take even more from the answer just because he's going to expound on what and why and how the job was, or whatever question it is. So another great question to ask. Question 7, what's the most embarrassing moment of your life? Ooh, I think any guy can answer this. If he's been around and lived a while, he may have more than one embarrassing moment. But I think that's, that type of question really gets a guy to open up and share, his thoughts and his feelings about and what made it embarrassing. Because what's embarrassing for one guy might not be embarrassing for the next guy. So Yeah, I think that's very important. Now we move to the personality questions. Again, 7 questions. Now these questions are designed to spark the imagination of a person. And it helps them kind of expound even more. There really aren't any right or wrong answers, but these questions really are here to tell you more about the person and within the answer itself. So question 8, what do you think is the biggest problem in the world today? And what do you think people should do about it? Who? Now, any man in 2018, which is at the time of this recording is 2018, any man should be able to answer this and probably talk for hours about it. That's not a right or wrong answer. There's not a yes or no. Again, a very deep, open-ended question, one that would definitely spark a great deal of dialogue. So, and again, that's not necessarily, these questions aren't in any particular order, and you don't have to, by all means, don't hit a guy off with all 21 of these questions at night, at one particular night or day, or at one particular time for that matter. But I just want to kind of give you an idea as to what it is. Question 9, if you could have lunch with anyone in the world, living or dead, who would you want to meet? That's a great question. I think one of the things that you can draw from that question is whoever they choose, particularly if it's not someone that's alive. If it's not someone that's alive, it's probably the person that they name is probably very important to them. So like for me, if you ask me that question, I would say my grandmother, my maternal grandmother. And so she passed away when I was 6. So I didn't, I have memories of her, but I don't have the memories that probably most of you have about your grandparents. So yeah, I would want to have, and that's someone who is very special to me. So, that right there kind of gives you an idea as to what, how a guy is really thinking. Question 10, what is your favorite movie character? And what do you like about him or her? Again, goes back to the previous questions about, when you talk about movies, and you really can get an idea, about what someone thinks and the characteristics of that particular person. Again, if he likes movies and he says, okay, well, my favorite, and I'll use this as an example, my favorite, movie character is the Terminator. Okay, well, why? Do you like to tear up shit and just kill people? But my point in saying that is that it gives you an idea of what qualities they deem to be likable. And it also, gives you an idea more about them and how they see things. Question 11. If I asked you to cook me dinner, what would you make me? Now, if he says, I don't know, that could be problematic. If he says, I don't know, because I don't know what you like, I think that could be problematic too, because I think at some point in time in your conversations with a guy, you tend to, men aren't really hard to read. I mean, and I think, we pick up on stuff, and I think at some point in time you can kind of tell him like what you like to eat, and he's going to regurgitate, or at least he should regurgitate that back to you. So I think that's a great question to ask. Great question to ask. Question 12. What is your favorite thing to do on a summer, spring, fall, or winter day? I think this is another good one because first and foremost, you probably want to find out what season that they enjoy the most. Like for me, spring and fall are my favorite seasons. So, I could talk ad nauseum about what I would do on a spring and fall day. Summer, I like the summer, but it's just hot here. I live in Atlanta, it's scorching hot, so it's not. Winter's okay. We really don't have, our winters are very mild up and down, but I can think of a ton of things, of my favorite things to do on a spring or fall day. And I think, you learn more about that person when you ask them about their favorite things to do. If his response is, I would just sit in the house and chill and watch TV, Well, I guess, that might. I don't know what that would tell you. Nonetheless, another great question to ask. Question 13. What is your biggest goal that you're working on now? Now, I will say this, ladies, be prepared. The answer may be you. And if he says you or something pertaining to you, then I think you should give him, get a brother some points, because I think that's, you're thinking he's thinking on his feet. And if his goals or his long-term or short-term goals involve you, then that's a good sign. And that's a good sign that he is, kind of really digging you, if you will. But if you're getting to know him and everything, and he says something else, don't be shocked by that either. But I think if he mentions you, then you're on the right track. And lastly, question 14. If you won the lottery tomorrow, what would be the first thing that you did with the money? Great question. Personally, for me, I'd get lost. But we're not talking about me. But again, it's an open-ended question. There's no right or wrong answer. It gives him a chance to dig a little deeper and really, really, kind of open up as far as, his thoughts. Then we move to the intimacy questions. Now, some of these questions range from the simple emotional to the blatant sexual. And, you can make a case that not all of these questions are quote unquote appropriate. But if you're planning to be intimate with him, then I think it's fair game. Okay. Question 15. Have you ever had your heart broken? If so, what happened? I think for men, this is a easy question to answer, but it's one that he's probably going to tiptoe around. Maybe not give you the full answer. You may have to dig a little deeper. And then some guys will rattle it off. They'll tell you everything that happened and how she was a low down, dirty scoundrel. She was just a skeezer. So it just depends, man. It just depends. So, I would not necessarily, ladies, get frustrated with that answer, but just be prepared, for anything. Question 16. If you wanted to kiss me, where would you take me to make it perfect? Now, this is a good question because what you're saying is you would want to be somewhere other than your house or your car or what have you to be romantically kissed. And it also kind of sheds light maybe on his romantic side, if there is one. Well, I'm sure there. I mean, everybody has a romantic side. Some just aren't as romantic as others. So I think this is a very good question. Ladies, on this question, I think you kind of got to keep your ears open and really kind of take notes on this because it really could be, worth your while. Question 17. What was your best lovemaking experience? Really? Okay. You really don't want to know the answer to this one. I mean, honestly, this is a question that they had listed here, so I'm going to give it to you. It's one of the 21, but you really don't want to know because, if he told you that she was, I don't know, wetter than the beach and this girl was wetter than the beach in a hurricane, I mean, you might be under a little bit of pressure. So tread lightly with this question. Tread very lightly and be upfront and honest if you can handle the answer. I think that's a tough one to ask, excuse me. Question 18. What do I need to know about your sex life? That's a very good question, especially in today's era with, sexually transmitted diseases, HIV, AIDS, even homosexuality. That those are open-ended questions that you want to know the answer to. And hopefully he'll be forthright and forthcoming with those answers. But that's a very, very good question. Again, particularly if it's something that you plan to do, ladies, with him, that's a question that needs to be asked prior to giving up the draws. Question 19. I mean, the elephant in the room, you knew it was coming. Have you ever cheated on a partner? Why? And did you get caught? I think there's a percentage of guys, and I think it's a small percentage, that will probably give you the correct and truthful answer. And that's cool. Particularly if the answer is yes. But more often than not, I'm going to keep it a buck. They're not going to tell you the truth. if they're trying to be, with you or whatever like that. But, it is what it is. I'm being honest. So yeah, tread lightly with that question. But I think it's a question that is still worth asking. Question 20. Tell me what you think is the sexiest thing about yourself. That is interesting because I don't think men necessarily look at ourselves and say, well, this part of me is sexy. Or maybe some do. I don't know. It's not something that we talk about a lot amongst each other. And then the follow-up question could be, tell me what you think is the sexiest thing about me. And when we say sexy, it doesn't necessarily have to mean, parts of your body, if you will. It could be your personality. It could be your, attitude. It could be your swag. I hate using the word swag, but swag, if you will. So I think that's a great question. And lastly, question 21. Do you think there's a difference between having sex and making love? And what is it? Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo. Man, listen. I think this is, be prepared for this answer. You really, really, really want to break out your number 2 pencils with this one, ladies, because, it could be, this answer could go really any kind of way, to be honest. And you have to just really be prepared for what it is that he's going to say. Now, keep in mind, you can't get mad at his answer, but his answer may or may not be what it is that you're looking for. So there you have it. 21 questions to ask a guy. You heard it here first. Again, I didn't dry snitch. I didn't break any man laws in the process. So ladies, take heed, take notes. Drop it on the guy that you're liking or getting to know, or, maybe you're started to date, and, let me know the results. Thanks again for checking out another edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I'm your boy 12 Kyle. I'll catch you guys next time. 5,000.